The Mayor,
Yep.
have the resolutions.
Yes, I do. Terry came and brought them to me.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that one's fine now. For whatever reason, they can't hear me.
Okay, so it seems to be 6:30. We'll get this show on the road. Madam Clerk, we have everything in order in regards to live streaming. Everything's good that way? Okay, so it is 6:30. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll begin doing so by the singing of the National Anthem of Canada. So please rise or you stand. have you unmute the counselors for any declaration of interest, if you can do that, Madam Clerk.
Bear with me one moment.
There we go. Thank you. Does anyone have a declaration of a conflict that they'd like to declare? Please do so at this time. Hearing nothing from the council, I'll move forward. Before we go any further in the meeting, I'd like to remind everyone as we get underway that everyone will be muted with the exception of the chair and the councillors when required. When council members wish to speak, I can recognize you, and I would ask that you wait a second or two just before you start speaking to ensure that the microphone is turned on if we've muted you in case. Finally, I would like to remind council members that when we do the voting, that they clearly show their hand in the screen and leave their hand visible for several seconds until myself can verbally indicate the outcome of the voting. And for those people who are attending, your video picture will not be displayed. You will be muted and will not be able to unmute yourself. As this is a special meeting of council, there will be no questions or input from the gallery attendees. Just prior to the in-camera portion of the meeting, we will take a brief recess and staff will be removing those attendees so they will not have access to the in-camera portion. Once you are removed, you will not be able to rejoin the meeting. So with that, we'll move forward with the consent agenda. First motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody, that the April 14th, 2020 council meeting minutes and the April 29th, 2020 special council meeting minutes be adopted as circulated / amended. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the minutes as circulated, please signify. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Jameson, are you in favor? We're good? Okay, I've got everybody. Thank you. And that carries. Next on the agenda are information items. The community
Sorry,
and business.
excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Oh,
Deputy Mayor Lackey had a
I
question.
apologize. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Indicated that this was a special meeting of the council. It's quite clearly indicated that it's a regular council meeting.
Oh, right. I apologize. But I guess the same rules apply in a council meeting. We don't have input from, I apologize for the saying that it was a special council meeting. It's a regular council meeting, but we don't usually take questions from the gallery during a council meeting. So that's why I read the snippet there. As far as information items, the two information items that are on the docket tonight are the Community and Business Services Report number CBS-015-20 COVID update. And the City of Hamilton resolution for support to regulate and enforce odor and lighting nuisances related to the cultivation of cannabis plants. The motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Maybe and seconded by Councillor Fody that the information be received and filed. Discussions on either one of those reports or questions to be asked? I have Councillor Olkey. Do I have anyone else who's looking? Okay, so if I can recognize Councillor Olkey, thank you.
I think perhaps Councillor Fody could best answer my question. What would be the concerns with this plant growing? Specifically because we're liable to see many acres of it cultivated in our own township as time goes on.
Councillor Fody, she can answer, and then we'll go to Director Venditti. Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Oh, I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Olkey. My understanding in talking to some of the players in the scheme is that it's a very pungent, strong smell when this crop is grown in any significant abundance. And, you know, if these are to be cultivated near housing developments or even one house, we likely will hear back from it. I have no experience in having picked this up myself, but I have been talking to some of the growers, at the meeting where hemp was introduced last February, January in Sealy's Bay. They too said that it's a very strong, pungent odor, but the good news is it doesn't drift that far. It's not like some of the odors on farms, but this one is a strong one.
Director Venditti, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, through your worship. I just wanted to remind council that prior to the COVID emergency, we did have an amendment on council for a public meeting to implement some cannabis regulations for growing and processing in our zoning bylaw. That meeting was canceled, but we will be bringing that forward at a later date. We just need to organize for the advertising in the newspaper. What we were proposing to do for that is, because our zoning bylaw right now has no provisions to address cannabis growing or processing, we were going to implement some definitions and some zones where it's a permitted use in the zoning bylaw, as well as implement some setbacks and minimum distance separations to make sure that some of the impacts from odor could be mitigated based on where cannabis is allowed to be grown or processed.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there any further questions in regards to the Community and Business Services COVID update or the letter for City of Hamilton, Deputy Mayor? And then Councillor Oakey.
So the related to the odor, where do we sit? I mean, obviously, is there something from the Ministry of Agriculture that covers some of this off? Because as Councillor Fody mentioned, there's been many odors from and complaints from farming, agriculture. So have they addressed this at all?
Director Venditti.
Thank you, through you. There's no specific requirements. So if you're a cannabis grower, you do have to be licensed. They're leaving it up to the municipalities to implement the specific restrictions or provisions around the growing of cannabis, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So in doing that, we've looked at a number of different municipalities where there have been some conflicts around the odor that has been generated from it. So the proposed setbacks that we're looking at are 300 meters from a growing area to a residential use. We just need to implement those. Well, we need to bring those provisions forward for council consideration.
And follow up, Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Oakey, then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you to Director Venditti. Are these the same measures that we have for agriculture uses? Same?
Through your worship, similar to it. So for agricultural uses, there's the minimum distance setback calculations that OMAPRA created. What we're looking at is a similar type of setback, but we've come up with the distance based on best practices from other municipalities that have done the same.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Oakey and then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just a reminder, and perhaps Councillor Fody can support my reminiscences here, but at that meeting where they came through and talked about it, they were looking for a minimum area to work in 20 acres, I believe, and there were people very excited about it and saying, "Oh, I've got 1,000 acres I can have right now." So this could actually become a fairly big crop in our area. That's just a point of information. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Maybe. I apologize.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. With the odor, again, it wouldn't be too much different than some of the cattle farms that we have and how that drifts, or even a chicken farm, which I know in my youth I worked on, and it was a very strong odor that carried many miles. I don't see this maybe being as bad, but certainly something to consider. But on the light standard, or the nuisance from the lights, in the city of Hamilton, you wouldn't think it might be as bad because there are a lot of street lights and ambient light from other things. Whereas in the rural setting that which we might be in, there's going to be some neighbors who are not used to that kind of light being shone 24/7 for a grow op, basically, because they'll probably have clear shelters, so the light will permeate out from them. I know the particular one we have here has a steel sided as well as a plastic. So you do have both both areas there. So I could see light being a nuisance to some of the people in our jurisdiction also. Thank you.
Councillor Fody, you had your hand up? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Just a comment to add to Councillor Maybe's comments. The difference maybe on the odor of this versus odors we experience now on our local farms, the ones we have now are not apt to be stolen. This product here, you've got to keep in mind, if we put this in close proximity to housing developments, there might be a lot of nighttime traffic around the back door of your house. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I'm sure the people that are going to be commercially growing this will have that thought in mind as well.
All good points you made. Councillor Maybe, you wanted to add something?
Just as a follow-up, Your Worship, to Councillor Fody's, cattle rustling has gone by the way in our area, but I'm sure it could happen again. Thanks.
Oh man, I knew that was coming. I just would like to add my thanks to the senior management team in regards to, and Director Goodman in regards to the synopsis in this report, just the dates and times. A lot has happened in a short period of time, so it's nice to see it bullet pointed and how things are currently working. And as things move forward and as things change, hopefully we can just add to this report or augment it, if you will. So thank you very much for that concise report. Any further discussion on the motion as it's presented? Councillor Fody? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add one more comment, not to one up you, Councillor, maybe, but you can be sure that all farmers are very cognizant right now of the price and climbing fast prices of beef, pork. Cattle rustling will rear its ugly head again. You can bet on it.
That's a whole other conversation about food sovereignty, but it is a timely one. So we'll finish up with this motion as it stands on the floor, unless there's any other questions. Seeing none, please signify. If you are in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. There we go. Opposed? None. And the motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So new business under discussion. We have industrial representative for the St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission. Ms. Venditti or Ms. Goodman, would you like to speak to that, or just to give us some context, Director Venditti?
Sure. Through your worship, this was placed on here. The current membership or the appointed member of the public that's on the corridor membership is appointed. It's George Horton, and his term expires at the end of June. So we wanted to bring it forward to council to recognize that we need to advertise for this position, or if there's any direction from council in terms of how they'd like to appoint this position. We were thinking that we would advertise it similar to a committee appointment and bring a report forward to council in June to appoint this individual. We just wanted to raise it as a point of discussion to see if council had any direction in terms of how they'd like to see that done.
Thank you. Before I take any suggestions or questions from the council, just as an aside, I sit on that board. It is very commercial based, manufacturing based. The majority of the representatives that sit on that are Greenfield Ethanol, Northern Cables, Burnby Farms, those sorts of commercial operations. So the whole point of the corridor was to attract larger scale businesses, either distribution hubs or manufacturing that would support manufacturing. And right now they are still working on that premise that they're trying to entice those people to come to this area to establish themselves, but they are also in preservation mode. So Charlie Mignot, the commissioner, is also setting his mind to assisting the businesses that exist within the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville to help them stay in business and get them the resources that they need, or get them connected with programs at the government or business plans, or if they have to rejig things. So it's sort of a community outreach program. They're still looking for new businesses, but they're also turning their minds to helping the existing businesses stay intact. So with that, if there's any suggestions from the floor, we'll take them. Otherwise, we will be advertising for this position. Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This has been, I think, a trying time for everybody, and I believe you're right. I'm in favor of putting this out because there's many issues, as you know. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
It's okay. You're allowed. It's the end of the day. So I'll recognize Councillor Gorell, please. And you're live. You're good.
Just an aside, we had voted to remain within the corridor for, I think, 1 year. And I can't remember the expiration of that. So before we go banging away on ads, we should be very clear on what our intentions and what our timing is.
I think that is also up for discussion going forward. I believe that I'm supposed to have another meeting here. We just had our annual general meeting, but the focus is somewhat fluid right now. So I think it bears the review yet again, Councillor Gorell. There are a number of businesses that will be struggling and looking for certain types of help. Whether that's advantageous to our businesses in our area, that is up for discussion. So perhaps we can bring that forward to the June meeting as well. Okay, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So it's assumed business as usual, as Councillor Grell said, pending our term on this committee to remain.
Mm-hmm.
We're assuming that we're going to move forward with appointing someone for another 2-year term. Is that the expectation?
Well, I think we would align the term with the amount of time left based on an annual renewal, because I think we've gone from a 3-year term to a 1-year renewal model at this point. So follow up, Councillor Fody. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Then perhaps I should word it differently, that the expectation would be to appoint someone for the limitation of our term up to a maximum of 2 years.
That would probably be a better way to word it. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Grell, did you have your hand up? Nope. Okay. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Lackey. Found your thought.
Regain my composure.
That's all right.
What commercial property? I mean, we talk about all this commercial and industry, but what do we actually have available other than just south of Lansdowne by the tracks? I'm not sure we're spending money on something we can't offer. So through you to our director, where are we going with this?
Director Venditti, do you want to add something to that?
Sure. Well, you're right in terms of the industrial lands that you've identified south of Lansdowne. But we do have permissions in our official plan to allow for rural industrial development and rural commercial development. A rural zone would allow a lot of it, subject to a zoning amendment, depending on the uses. So while we don't actually, as a township, have land that we're marketing to sell for industrial and commercial uses, there are properties within our township that could fit the bill depending on what's coming to locate here. At the same time, we don't have serviced land available, which is what some of them are looking for, but we can offer up rural commercial and rural industrial. We can help find large properties that might suit the purpose. So we do have some land to work with. The other thing is we can be complementary depending on what might be going in other municipalities. We can offer up land for residential uses to help support those uses.
Follow up, Deputy Mayor, and then I'll recognize Councillor Jamieson, then Councillor Gorell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, how do we put that out there? And I guess through you, Your Worship, is that being conveyed?
It actually is. Just recently, we were approached by a very specific commercial business that was brought to us through Mr. Mignon, who was factoring in one of our properties in the township as a possible location for a fairly large business. So not to say that we would be excluded by not being part of the corridor, but it's definitely advantageous from that point of view because we're all we're supporting the cause. But I think this goes back to what Councillor Fody made a point a year ago when we were having this very similar discussion, because I too was struggling with the value of being part of this commission. But what it is for the greater good, because while we may not get them in this particular municipality, say Front of Young ends up with it near their 401 exit per se. Those people who want to live close by and work in close proximity, they might be buying houses here, and they contribute to commercial taxes, commercial rates to the county, which means that it takes somewhat of the burden off of the rest of us. So it is about the greater good. That's the reason the corridor was started. But I do appreciate, Deputy Mayor, your point of view from the point of, like, what are we getting out of it? So we are being included, and Director Venditti can verify that. She has been contacted by Mr. Mignon on a few occasions about specific lands that are located within our municipality. So I'll let you speak, Director Venditti, and then Councillor Jameson, then Councillor Grow.
Thank you. Through your worship, if I could just add to that, we've had a number of meetings with the corridor, even during the COVID emergency that's ongoing, and they've been changing their focus in terms of helping focus inward now and looking at preserving and helping the businesses that we have rather than recruiting new ones for the time being. And so Director Goodman and I have had a number of meetings with Mr. Mignon from the corridor to talk about how they can assist us and what they can do with us. So we've been successful in getting some outreach information from them that we can help in having those conversations with our businesses to figure out how we can help them with what's going on right now too, and help them with their businesses.
Okay, Councillor Jameson, then Councillor Gorell.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. From my point of view, this discussion about the Economic Development Commission, I believe, should be taken in the context of everything else we're having to look at with respect to our overall expense load and the challenges to our tax base and everything else that's going on. How many organizations that are funded by the municipalities are out there helping businesses? Our own business services are making an effort. One assumes the county is on that case. Is there a full coordination? Are we all doing this in lockstep? I think these are the things we have to consider as we're looking at potentially reducing our commitments generally because of our own challenges internally. We're deferring, we're postponing, we're doing all kinds of things. We're going to be looking to the other organizations that we fund to basically reduce their expectations from us. So I don't have a judgment on where this should go with respect to the commission, but I do believe it should all be within the context of all the things we need to consider as we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Councillor Gorell, do you have anything to add to that? No? Okay. Councillor Fody, and then I'll just remind everybody, this isn't a motion. This was just for general discussion, and then we'll bring a motion to the June meeting where we'll have a wholesome discussion there. Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I look at this involvement with St. Lawrence Economic Development Commission as much like you sitting at County's Council. If we don't have a representative there, how are we going to get that feedback from us to them and from them back to us? And yes, I would be nice to think that, you know, General Motors are going to move in here and whack up a 1,000-acre plant and hire 4,000 employees. I don't think I'm going to live that long. Having said that, it wasn't too many months ago that we passed a nice little business 3P propane north of Gananoque. So not all business has to be in grandiose scale. that business, when it's up and running north again, is going to employ 7, 8, 10 people. So that's my only comment there. I feel we need to be at that table. Councillor Jameson's got a valid point. Maybe we can't afford to be half the places we want to be. Time will tell.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the just to tie a bow on that, there will be further discussion at the June Committee of the Whole. And as of June, we'll be going back to our regular scheduled meetings. So we'll have our Committee of the Whole the first Monday of June and our council meeting on the second Monday of June. And we'll have that, and hopefully we'll have some further information. I can work with the directors in regards to where the corridor is sitting, what they're offering, and what our commitment would be going forward and timelines. So we'll be ready for the June meeting. Next on the discussion list is the United Counties Leeds and Grenville budget and lower tier payments. This has been on my plate for the last month. I've been looking at our tax received on the interim bill has been not too bad. Originally, we had thought we were down about 34%, but I believe the treasurer could give us a more well-rounded picture as of now. We're not doing too bad. I believe that we are close to where we were, if not exactly where we were last year around this time for received payments. But of course, the concern is going forward. The larger concern, I just received my package for county late last week, and I've had a chance to do my first review, and the overall general consensus is that county is business as usual. They're not taking the same steps, not to the degree that we're taking, about looking at budgets, whether it be capital projects, deferrals, or even transfer payments to reserves, that sort of thing, and overhead operating costs. So the challenge for me as a member of county council is that I don't subscribe to the same idea of thought that maybe county is looking at. I know that I have a number of colleagues that are feeling the same way, that we need to sharpen our pencils and look at things. But maybe Director Tyndall, could you speak to some of the things that you've learned about on your calls with the municipal finance administrators, calls that you've been having, and some of the things that the upper tier governments have been doing in their respective areas?
I guess through you, Your Worship. So we had one call with the county in the lower tiers, and basically kind of given the same message that it's business as usual for the county. Some of the lower tiers, including myself, asked if we could at least collaborate in terms of what everybody's doing. So I think there's only been 3 of us have emailed in kind of what we've done in terms of due dates and extending, if we've extended due dates, what that looks like, and where we are at with our receivables, and if we had plans or if we know what we're going to do with the final tax bill, which most of us don't really have that decision, and we haven't come to council with that yet to try to make a decision. So there hasn't been a lot of conversation, and there was no indication that they were going to give us any leniency when it came to our quarterly remittances for the taxes. And I haven't had any actual follow-up in terms of another call or any other information from the county.
So just to bookend what Director Tyndall has said, the call that she had with county was business as usual. Nothing's really changed on our end, and they don't seem to share our same pain points, which, while I can appreciate they're dealing with things like EMS, community housing, social needs, childcare, all of those sorts, very important programs, but that there's also overhead as well as capital projects and so on and so forth. But the Director Tyndall and I are going to go back through the county budget to see if there are ways and places that we can trim. But I would be welcome to any suggestions from the rest of council if you have any questions or concerns or ideas where you might think they can make some changes. So, Councillor Jameson.
Your Worship, it surprises me to hear this again. I mean, putting aside that it's
rather lousy optics on the part of the county not to be engaged in some sort of discussion about cost containment. Are they in lockstep with other municipalities? Are we the only one that is recognizing potential challenges down the road? I mean, the ones around us may dissipate to some extent, but from a business, commercial, and other collection opportunities may certainly change. Are other municipalities around us so far less aggressive that the message to county staff is that they can stand still? That's a question. I'm serious about the question.
And it's a very valid question. Director Tyndall, you had a couple of, or you gave me a couple of examples from, I believe one was Essex, the upper tier in Essex, that had already changed their bylaws and how things had been paid. And there are some other upper tiers that have already proactively done things to assist their lower tiers and had been working more collectively in that way. So I'll let you speak to that, Director Tyndall.
Through your worship, so on the Municipal Finance Officers Association, they had a couple webinars where they had examples. So an upper tier and a lower tier municipality, and I forget, honestly, I apologize, I forget which one, but it's probably the one you're speaking of, that they were going through examples of the types of things they're looking at. So where they're reducing operating, looking at staffing. A lot of them were reducing, obviously, summer staff, part-time staff. Pretty much most of the stuff they're looking at, when I reviewed and watched, a lot of it's very similar to what we've been doing. But the one thing that these ones that I watched on the presentations, they were meeting regularly. So the lower tiers and the upper tier would be meeting at least once a week, sharing where they're at, so they could be consistent too. So if they were deferring due dates, they would line up those due dates, those deferrals, so that each of the lower tiers was looking at the same type of program for the residents, so that it wasn't different in each lower tier, and just working together to try to figure out where they could mitigate costs, understanding that it is going to impact taxes payable for some people, and it's hard to understand, or definitely it's hard to understand that impact right now. But definitely there's some municipalities that are definitely more, I think, forward-thinking like we are, and trying to be a bit more proactive to make sure that we mitigate those risks now instead of getting to the end of the year. And then I just don't want to see us end up in a deficit. So I think there's others that are definitely thinking the same way. There are some municipalities, when I've done some research online, that I don't seem to find the same type of reporting that we've been doing, where we've been trying to find these things, bring them forward to council. Like, I don't see that yet. So maybe they're just waiting to see what's going to happen with their final property tax bills. But again, it could be too late, because once you get a really good handle on the collections in the fall, then how do you save when you only have a month or two left? So I definitely think we're being proactive, which is great, because I just don't want to see us end up somewhere that we can't get out of at the end of the year.
Thank you, Director Tyndall. So really, I would ask that if you have the time, and I will circulate it, there is a report going to my special county council meeting, which is Thursday. They have alluded to some small gestures, which was things like what Director Tyndall spoke about, which was seasonal staff. But other than not hiring seasonal staff, they weren't really talking about anything else. And they certainly weren't talking about deferring any projects. Only keep in mind, only 40% of the budget that happens at county comes from the lower tiers. The 60% comes from the province and transfer payments. But nonetheless, the county has 34 million in reserves that would be helpful if any one of us, any of the member municipalities, were struggling to help cash flow things if need be. But my hope is that before the June committee of the whole, because we're going back to the same schedule as usual at county in June, and my hope is that at that point in time that I can go to that particular council meeting with some very specific questions. I'm going to work with our treasurer to put those together, and I believe that our treasurer has been speaking with some other neighboring municipalities, their treasurers as well, to get a handle on things. So, Councillor Fody, you had something to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. You two had touched on one of the things I was going to say, in the fact that county only receives 40% of their funding from the municipalities. So in reality, the larger portion is not us that they're worried about. But do you not also think that we're their buffer. The municipalities that make up, say in this case, Leeds and Grenville, the municipalities themselves and the towns, we become their buffer. So they don't really have the hands-on and the day-to-day perhaps interaction with the businesses and individuals as we as members of this council and others do. We hear face-to-face, as I'm sure we all have, the struggle some of these businesses are undertaking, and it just hasn't quite climbed the ladder high enough yet to get to the county level, but I think in due time they'll hear it.
I've been trying to make it known well in advance, but you know, I do have support from other colleagues. We will be taking something more comprehensive once we get back to our regular committee level, but we're just going to try a video conferencing this week for the first time since all of this started at county, so that'll be a step up in the world. Anyways, are there any other suggestions in regards to the county's budget and lower tier payments? If not, we'll leave it for further discussion at committee of the whole in June. Okay, moving along in the agenda. So next on the docket is moved by Councillor Foley, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council award tender OPS-2020-014 to Morris Chemicals, a division of Dali Dust Control Limited, and that council awards tender OPS 2020 0-013, the Road Maintenance Equipment and Services Inc. RMES. Discussion on this motion. Director, Councillor Maybe, and then Deputy Mayor, did you have your hand up? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I have a couple questions to Director Queen. Possibly, why is there two different companies doing this process? Are there two different chemicals? The cost difference from last year isn't too much greater, but I guess just wonder why there's two companies and possibly two different chemicals.
Go ahead, Director Roheen.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Maybe. So the lower concentration that we procure is a natural product. It comes out of the ground as a brine. And so that's RMES. They provide that to us for the dead end roadways and some of the lower volume roadways. And then the high test stuff is a manufactured chemical that we use on the higher class of roads. So it's a totally different product in terms of how it comes, from the nozzles on the truck. But the lower concentration stuff is available from that one location. Somewhere near Peterborough or something like that, where it naturally comes out of the ground.
Follow-up, is that the 300,000 liter product and it is applied twice a year?
It should be the 150,000 is the lower concentration, the 18 to 22, about 20%. Brine. And we apply it once per year. Typically this time of year, we do like to have it booked in before now, but our schedule is what it is. And I will add as well, just to answer your earlier question, there's very few companies that offer this now. It's been a similar situation to other products, commodities that seem to be stuck in these takeovers and the mergers and stuff like that, which is we see year over year reduces the competition and increases our price.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lacking, and then Councillor Cody.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just wondering, there's comments made that, various roads get one chemical and one gets the other. How do we know when we don't have traffic counts? Are we doing any traffic counts as far as our back roads or even some of our secondary roads?
Director Roheen.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So we're selecting the roads for the different treatments based on the knowledge of the manager in the department. The report that'll come next will talk about having some updated counts throughout the township. We do have a few counters, and we've never deployed them. We've charged them up a few times, but it certainly, if we're able to get some of those deployed this year and figure out how to use them and that sort of thing, then we'll certainly start to gather those counts. But our sense is that this year, some of those counts won't be as accurate because we're just not seeing the people out on the roads that we might in a typical year. So we have to be a little cautious about the where we're placing these and that the data will be accurate and useful for us.
Okay, Councillor Fody and then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our to Mr. Goheen. When you look at the price differential here on the lower quality, if you will, or less sustaining, why not, in the case of our financial situation right now, why not take the lower quality grade and apply it twice? If you took your 300,000 liters and applied it twice at the lower cost, you would end up a little over 44,000, 44,500, we'll round it off. Adding that to what you had planned on doing on the lower or secondary roads, you would still end up with a total of less than 67,000 compared to our 80 now by using both chemicals. It's just a little math game I played there the other night at home.
Your Worship, through you, there's a component to the program that isn't really being shown with these tender awards. These are for the supplier to bring the tankers in and spread this, but we also have relatively significant efforts on the part of the township staff to get in there and do a deep grading. We have a water truck that needs to follow along with that, and so it requires a little more than just handing a truck driver a list of roads to apply it to. So our sense, and I think Mr. Deputy Mayor, you could confirm this, that in the past, when we were able to get when the weather lines up and we're able to get that good deep grade done in the spring and apply that stabilizer, most times it does last fairly well into the fall. I know there's certain discussions, certain roads that certainly stand up better than others with the treatment, but still recommend to proceed with the dual chemicals, but only once per year because we need to redeploy those staff in other areas later on in the year.
Councillor Maybe, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you, back to Adam Queen's comment about the counters, and that at this time when everybody's supposed to be staying home, our count would be way off, I would hope. So it might not be advantageous to do it in the near future, but certainly when things get back to normal, possibly getting one in the fall when normal traffic levels, school buses, etc., are back on place and running properly. Thank you.
Okay, further, Councillor Fody?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one more comment. Part of the problem of those of us who live on gravel roads is the assumption that the quality material put down is good for the whole summer. Thus, the grader doesn't come out and disturb it, if you will, until late in the fall. I can assure you, myself and a lot of neighbors would agree to the fact we'd far rather see it applied twice a year, have the deep grading done twice a year. I think, the potholes would be much less come late August, if you will, than what we have now. It's just a thought. I don't know. I'd like to see it. Maybe the best way to do this or achieve it would be do an experimentation on a couple of roads in different locations.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Lackey. Oh, sorry. Do you want to add to that, Director Goheen? I apologize.
No, just certainly a comment there, Councillor Fody, and I'm sure you've seen some of the roads in your neighborhood. And I would almost bet that once we do have some updated traffic counts, we may see that those roads just have too much traffic on them to be suitable for being loose top with that sort of treatment. It may be just that tipping point to where maybe some other interventions are indicated. Just putting that out there.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Lackey?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I made a few calls, and even though we do the grading and we put this calcium down, that does not mean that we can't regrade. That calcium will reset, so it's not a one-time deal. I'll go to Adam for his expertise, but as far as I know, that we can regrade roads in the middle of the summer and the calcium will reset.
Okay. Any further questions in regards to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I will call the question for the award of the tender OPS 2020-014 and OPS 2020-013. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. And it's carried unanimously. Okie dokie. Thank you. Next, sorry, I've got too many piles of paper around my computer. So next on the docket is Operations Report number OP-011-20. Motion on the floor is by Councillor Mabey and second by Councillor Fody. The councillor accept the request for proposal submission from the Greer Galloway Group, Inc. for consulting engineering services for the road asset inventory update and comprehensive road needs study. Any discussion on this motion? I believe it's what the director was referring to in his earlier comment. Director Goheen, did you want to just give a 10 minute sorry, 10 second overview, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. 10 minutes, let's start the clock. I could talk for hours. And so the previous road management study that was completed by a qualified consultant dates back to 2007. And, a number of the projects that were indicated on within that study have been completed, a couple of hard surface conversions throughout the township and so forth. But my concern with that study has always been what I view as a lack of good, solid traffic counts. I get a sense that in many cases in that existing study, the consultant was just applying just a standard number. And while that may be fine for certain roadways that may be a low volume dead end road with no significant traffic generators, for many other roads, to me, it is critical to have actual counts done at the right time of year. And so we can capture the amount of traffic is actually a roadway is actually seeing. And even as we seek to spend about 25,000 here in these times of restraint, it to me is it's an investment in the future, let's say, and it's going to become more critical that we use evidence to make our decisions. And so there's the days of the anecdotal roads needs list should be done. We need this document to help inform future capital programs where a lot of these projects, frankly, will be competing for the same dollar. So it is. We were pleased that the study came in, about half the budget, and the traffic count program. The consultant has agreed to do it as this year as we can, as well as hold the price until next year when we can get some seasonal counts on some of these roadways that we probably wouldn't capture that accurate data in 2020.
Question for you, Director Goheen. Myself, this falls into asset management as well, does it not? Into the asset management plan?
Yes, and I know Director Tyndall and I have discussed this briefly a couple of times, and the province has been announcing extensions on a great number of programs and other things, but neither one of us have heard the government will be extending the July 1st, 2021 deadline on sort of the first phase of the asset management planning. So we part of this project is that geo-referenced or digital inventory and the condition assessment, and that information can be used to plug into the software and get us going. And Director Tyndall and I will have to figure out how we're going to integrate that data and make it useful for us to meet compliance with our hiring freeze currently precluding the hiring of that asset management person. So yes, we do require to gather that information this year, which is why we are recommending to move forward with it in 2020 rather than defer it until we can get the good counts next year.
Fair enough. Councillor Jameson, you had your hand up?
Or I do have a request of our director. And in reviewing this earlier and now, first of all, he mentioned it, that this particular study of any kind doesn't appear to have been done since 2007. So this is a big step forward that we're getting it done. I hope that in the course of the recommendations, we see how often this should be done to make sure that we stay up to date, partly because the changes in the condition of the roads in 13 years at this stage, particularly with the climate challenges we face, should look at it a little bit differently than looking at something that's 10 to 13 years before we do it again. And I appreciate it's going into the asset management bundle, which I think will be helpful for us. The other thing that I spoke to the director about was there is a little bit of a rumor flying around that this study is going to take in the discussion of the private roads. And my understanding is that it is not taking the discussion of the private roads into this particular situation. And I would hope that we make sure, if I'm correct, that publicly we're making sure that people on private roads don't think we're moving in a direction that where we end up taking up the control of private roads. And I say that as somebody who lives on a private road. So I'm not proposing it. I just want to make sure we're clear with residents that this is to deal with the 300 plus kilometers of roads we already own. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it does speak to that specifically, Director Rohinen, the 323 kilometers of road that we already have. So I believe that is only that's only what it's covering. It's not including any private roads, correct, Director Rohinen?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, or to you, I guess I should say. So, according to the information, and it's in the report that the United Counties had provided to us in terms of the road network, I was surprised that there were as many kilometers of private roads in the municipality. So it's almost a third over again of roadways. So, yeah. Councillor Jameson, we've discussed this. You're correct. This is certainly not going to open the door in any way, shape, or form to assuming those private roadways. As you're aware, many of these roadways would need to be brought up to a current municipal standard, which we're talking, as we've seen in La Rue Mills and other roads that we've converted, hundreds of thousands of dollars, almost on a per kilometer basis. So I think it's prudent for us to take a look at what we have currently, in municipal network, and find out what condition it's in and develop a plan for it without even thinking or looking for what we could be adding in. That wouldn't be my recommendation, certainly at this hour at all.
Okay, good. Deputy Mayor Lackey?
Yes, thank you. While that report is somewhat aged, there was no action taken upon that report. That was through Greer Galloway as well, and I know that report is somewhere on the shelves in the municipal building. Some of that is valid, very valid. We did action some, but I think Adam would agree that we can look at some of that from 2007. I didn't think it was that old. Didn't think I was that old. But there's some very good information in the report that we already have.
Okay, so any other comments on this motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. Hands up. Got it. Opposed? None. Unanimous, and it's carried. Thank you. Okay, next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the council receive finance report number FN-013-20 dated May 11th, 2020, and that staff proceed with the changes as directed by council. Any discussion on this report presented by the finance department? Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Again, one of the statements in it is 16 days after the end of the emergency, and since our Premier has held that till June 2nd now at this point, it puts it close to the end of June for any tax arrears possibly. And in saying that, the tax arrears are pretty fair, and alluded to earlier in our meeting that the taxation dollars have been fairly steady to what even last year was. So we're actually in a pretty good state compared to what we were fearing. So it's always good to have. But so we're looking at toward the end of June before taxes become due again then.
Right. And I am also pleased to see that our receivables are not that far out of whack compared to year over year. So I appreciate the finance staff and their attention to this detail and why we might be where we're at versus the previous report. Director Tyndall, did you want to add anything to that before I ask for any other questions?
Sure, through you, Your Worship. So just to clarify, the receivable balances that are in this report now are as of April 30th. Previously, I had included March 31st receivable balances. The other thing to keep in mind is these receivable balances are on the total amount we bill. So we bill 3 different portions, obviously the county, the education, and our portion. And these receivable balances are on that total billing. So it's not just our portion. So again, I think relatively speaking, we are a little bit behind, but given the fact that we extended the due date to May 19th, we still may see some influx of payments coming in. I guess it's later this week, early next week, as people hopefully will pay by that due date. And then our final tax bill will go out in, I believe, in August, and is typically due in September. And that's where we project that there could be some more significant impact for people that have perhaps lost their job or been laid off temporarily through this pandemic. I also included a note there on the utility receivables. Again, we deferred the dates on the one bill. So the one bill was deferred to June 1st. So we're a little bit behind there. But again, I think that we will hopefully likely see that kind of catch back up as the June 1st date arrives for that due date for the utility bill that we deferred.
Thank you, Director Tyndall. Any further questions on this report? Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I did have another note here that the library has a reduction of about 25,405. Kind of went through the numbers a little quickly there and kind of wondered whether there were more reductions or potentially more reductions there. And I know we just got a new updated financial document today on that, which I have not had a chance to go through, but I did have it down as a note and wondered if there were any more savings to be had there.
Tara, would you, Ms. Mendez from the library,
yes.
do you have anything?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. This is such a fluid time for everybody that definitely the library is continually looking at its budget, and I anticipate there'll be further reductions as time goes on. We have a board meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, and there'll be additional information then after we have a chance to discuss with our library vendors further to discuss additional savings and cost-cutting measures. So definitely there'll be additional savings. We are truly in this together.
Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Councillor Jameson, you had a question, and then Deputy Mayor Lackey.
I think the deputy mayor was ahead of me.
Oh, I apologize. We're good? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Jameson. He's giving you the floor.
Okay, well, my understanding is that this is not I'm doing what Deputy Mayor did. I'm losing it for a second. This is not a motion on the floor to pass a financial budget. Some of the things that we're dealing with here are things that we have seen in some detail, and we're simply validating the approach that our treasurer is taking with the internal costs. That is my understanding. But then in this appeared the library note. And also today we received a spreadsheet not a budget, but a spreadsheet from the library. And when I say spreadsheet as opposed to a budget, I mean a budget would have previous years and comparatives and do all that, which it doesn't. But we noted that there's a $53,000 change in position in the library with respect to last year, which means money comes back to us. So we're in a bit of a state of continuous flux. And my numbers tell me that the budget, if we were to pass a budget today, would be more like 380,000. But we're seeing a different request on the table, even though there's 411,000 less 25,000. So if this is not a money budget to pass, I think we need to defer the discussion about the library until there's some clarity in the numbers, because they seem to be, and again, we only received a breakdown in a spreadsheet today. There isn't enough information to pass anything. And that's why I'm asking. I want to make sure that by accepting this report, we are not passing something. Thank you.
Director Tyndall, I don't believe that that is the intent of this report. This was just to make the changes that we had suggested, and that the budget savings, we still haven't passed the budget for the library at this point. But that this was just included as it was submitted by the library to date, but it does not infer that we've passed their budget. Is that correct, Director Tyndall?
Through your worship, yeah, that's correct. This is more just an information from from my point of view. It's an information item. One, we're finalizing the audit, so I was made aware of the surplus. We had to book it on our books as a receivable for year end, working with the auditor. So I provided that as information. Then as well, I received the information from the library on the savings they have found to date. So again, like what we've been doing with the departments, providing that as information. But yes, you're correct. We have not, still not passed anything on the 2020 library budget.
And if I'm not mistaken, that will come to the June meeting for final review, if you will, I believe. Is that correct?
Through your worship, I know they're bringing their business plan, I believe, in the June meeting. So
I think that was the thing. So we were going to look at the business plan, and then from the business plan, then refer back to the budget and just make decisions going forward. Does that answer your question, Councillor Jameson, or there's mud?
Thank you, Your Worship. To the extent that we're not doing anything tonight, but if we're looking to a June presentation of some kind, whatever constitutes a business plan, I know I, for one, will be looking for a multi-year comparative to try to figure out what has gone on before the last 2 or 3 years, going back to 17, 18, as well as 19 and going forward with 20, because the numbers keep changing. A year ago, or whenever it was, we were sworn in. That's 15 years ago, I think now. There was a pullback on library services. Now we're seeing another one, and it just we need to have a clear picture of where they're at, have been at, and where they're going. That is identifiable as business planning, as I understand it, but in the context of our own municipal staff's effort to provide us with that kind of breakdown, so that we, on behalf of the taxpayer, know that whatever we invest is there's an efficacy and a veracity to it is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was about the reserves and the fact that we did, as Councillor Jameson mentioned, we did take back some reserves, or they were given back to us. Apparently there are more, twofold. Why didn't we recognize these before? And can we as a township and Kate, can we be the treasurer? We need to take control.
Well, I think that Tara, Ms. Mendez can speak to the fact that the library board has been working on trying to bring forward a budget. I did have further discussion with Director Tyndall actually today in regards to communication on the finance things. It does seem to be, we ask for something, Tara brings it to us, which is fine, but then it's a back and forth thing. But the reason the surplus came forward is because the audit was being done with books. Director Tyndall, you had mentioned that in your previous life as a different treasurer in a different municipality, you attended the board meetings and you helped basically shape some of the financial policy at that level. Is that correct?
Yeah, through your worship, I think that we might be able to work on improving some of that communication with the library and the finances so that maybe I can just be a little bit more in tune with what's happening and maybe provide some assistance. I mean, I'd be open and happy to do that. With respect to the reserve funds, they did return money this year. Sorry, I'm talking 2019 because I'm still working on the year end, but they did return money in 2019 that had accumulated, I believe, related to facilities. And then they do have their own reserve funds when it comes to technology and like a working fund type reserve fund, which I believe they may collect donations, and Ms. Mendez, I'm sure, can speak to that. So, and that will actually all come forward next month when I bring the financial statements, and the library is consolidated in with our financial statements. So we'll be going over all of those numbers in June.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you have something else to add?
Oh, yeah. We, as council, do the budget. We give them their funding. But then we're relying on the board to disperse that funding or control the spending. And there's no one on the board, in my opinion, that has the expertise, if you will, as a treasurer or someone that has that responsibility to look after that funding. So basically, we're giving money to people to spend on the board. That's my issue. I would like to see that there's someone there that's got some expertise in the field to look after that funding.
Well, I think that based on the conversations, like Ms. Mendez referred to, the board is meeting again this week to talk about budget impacts and, as she said, fluid things. But as per the conversation that I had with Director Tyndall, I think it would be helpful for them to have someone with Kate's background, as you say, Deputy Mayor, that might be there to help them sort out the financial aspect of things. And if we're involved with helping them frame things, then it'll be easier come audit time, because that was a pleasant surprise, if you will, that we will receive approximately 53,000 back from last year. But then it speaks to this year's budget and how that applies to this year's budget and those sorts of questions. But I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here, because it will be coming back to the June meeting for further discussion, both from the business plan point of view as well as the audit. Director Tyndall, you're bringing the final audit to the June meeting, that's correct?
Yeah, well, yes, the auditors will be attending the meeting virtually, and we'll be going through the year-end audit and the financial statements for your approval.
So we can have a wholesome discussion in regards to the finances at that point in time. Would that satisfy the council? Yes? No? Oh, I can't hear you, Deputy Mayor, sorry.
I think Gord had a comment.
Oh, I apologize. Gord, did you have a comment?
Yes, Your Worship. The library board has gone through some pretty powerful head crashes over transparency and lining things up. And the deputy mayor is quite correct in that the level of expertise in managing finances there is probably less than required. A huge proportion of their financial business is done by our treasury department anyway. I think
payroll.
moving forward, they could probably take over all of it and not really notice any extra work but it seems to have been very, very difficult to get a budget to this degree of granularity from the library. It's been one of my challenges on that board for the time that I've been there. So I think we can see that there's probably a way ahead there with our own staff. And I don't think that's out of line with what happens in other municipalities. Thank you.
Okay, so unless there's further questions on this, this finance report for the COVID reductions, revisions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion that's on the floor, can I please have you signify? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next on the floor is a motion moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the council approve the distribution of community grants in the amount of $60,138 as detailed in Appendix A to report number CBS-016-20. Director, or I'll just, hands are going up all over the place. Hang on. Okay, so I'm going to recognize Councillor Grell. I'm going to recognize Councillor Maybe and then Councillor Fody. So Councillor Grell.
Good point. 2 points come to mind. Number one, we should defer this for about 50 minutes until we talk on CBS 17, because 17 has a very direct bearing on 16, because it's a fait accompli the way this is written, and we have yet to discuss 17. And my second point would be, if we're going to discuss 16, right into the weeds here, I was curious that the Lansdowne Association for Revitalization was given $5,000 for a community development plan. That strikes me as being township business. I'm open to further discussion on that, but it struck me as an odd duck in there. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you, or Kim, actually, Director Goodman, would you say that that is correct, that we should actually rescind this motion and go with the other one first, because that would affect this particular motion that's already on the floor, correct?
It may. Through you, Your Worship, yes, it may.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, I've already put the motion on the floor. Do I rescind it? Do I have to have a motion to rescind it? Or do I have to have people defeat it and then bring it back? Or how do I do this?
If you defeat it, you can't bring it back.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So what you can do is table it.
Table it.
So we can have discussion on CBS 17. And then pending the outcome of that, you can go back to CBS 16.
Perfect. Thank you. So do I need a vote to table it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I will ask for a vote to table this motion until we can discuss the next one. All those in favor of tabling? All those opposed of tabling? None? All, that's unanimous.
Madam Mayor, do I have a mover and seconder for that tabling?
Sorry, thank you. I have a mover is Councillor Maybe and a seconder is Councillor Olkey. Okay, so with that, thank you, Councillor Grell, for process. Moved by Councillor Fody. Oh, sorry, I already called the question on that one. I've got all discombobulated here. So, moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approve a special community grant COVID intake, and that council delegate authority to staff for the review and award of said grant applications. Discussion on this motion. I'm assuming Councillor Grell, you have some thoughts on this. Go ahead.
In reading it, it's hard to speak against apple pie here, so I don't want to seem like the bad guy, but I have some concerns. In essence, 17 is about helping businesses achieve the government guidelines and safe business, HVAC, online support and marketing. But there's a phrase in there that goes on to say, pardon me, it's to do with fundraising activities of not-for-profits. And suddenly the waters got very muddy to me as I was reading this. And I do appreciate the spirit with which it is put together. I do, however, question strongly the criteria it's all over the map. And I'm a little unsettled with that because this is coming out of a community grants program. And this program is trying to help people with financial difficulties, businesses. Were those businesses home-based? Were those businesses that were paying commercial tax rates? There's a difference. And also the spread in money from $500 to $2,000 is a significant spread. And lastly, and I would suggest an amendment to that. And lastly, the potential of double dipping. And that would be this. So I run a business and I apply for a grant for $1,000 for something. And yet I'm also a member of a Chamber of Commerce. And we somehow, staff decides the Chamber of Commerce is going to get some money. That's double dipping in my mind. So I don't want to argue with the concept of being a good neighbor to businesses. That's wonderful. But the document is a little too shotgun an approach for my liking. And I would just like some further feedback on taking this money from a community grants program. I appreciate what staff has done. It's a pretty cool idea. But I would like to know how the rest of council feels about that. Those are my concerns. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. How do we make people accountable for this money? I mean, there's some people that will go over the top to make their staff safe. There are some people that will take the money. They'll take a piece of plexiglass and a bottle of spray nine. And, you know, you get the same, or they think they're getting the same result. So how do we police this? Because there are some good employers out there, and there are some who, you know, are not to say that they're not good employers, but they don't think in the same manner as far as the safety of their employees.
Fair enough. Any other comments to be made on this? Councillor Jameson and then Councillor Fody.
I appreciate the comments from both Councillor Grell and Deputy Mayor. I guess in some respects, I personally am prepared to err on the side of trust with respect to how people behave. I mean, up this way, I've spent a lot of time talking to our various businesses that are quite fully shut down or only partially open or a little bit open or struggling. And there's absolutely no revenue coming in, and we would like them to be there on the other side. If there are more careful ways of guiding them and helping them, that to Councillor Gorell's point, I see that and I support that point of view. But the spirit of it is fundamentally important. But I think not only the spirit of it, the reality of need is there in order to get these people to a point where the cash hopefully begins to flow again. And I'm actually an optimist by nature, but I think this is going to be a long and very deep hole from which our business community, our small business community in particular, is going to be climbing out for a very, very long time. So I take the point, but at the same time, I'd rather take a little risk here and there than lose the opportunity to lend a hand.
Councillor Olkey, you had something, Councillor Olkey? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. There are some businesses that on their own have gone ahead and put these protective measures in. There's a little bit of a sense perhaps of favoring some businesses over others with this. Although I think in the spirit of community generosity, most of that could be overcome. The thing I would suggest is that if people came with a comprehensive plan, perhaps based on some guidelines, some of the suspicious aspects of this could be mitigated. And beyond that, I agree with what my colleague, Councillor Jameson and Balcony Buddy has to say about it. Thank you.
So Councillor Fody, and then Councillor, maybe you had something to ask as well? Okay, so Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to hear from our Director of Community and Business Services, and because I know one item in particular here, for instance, the Turkey Fair has been canceled. So how current are these numbers? I know they have to be compiled ahead for our meeting, but there's one instance. But I do concur with Councillor Gorell that when you read these two proposals, there's definitely a dovetailing, to quote Your Worship, of what's going on here, and we got to somehow separate the two, just as Deputy Mayor had indicated, so there isn't any double dipping, if you will. But I like what I see on both, but somehow I would like a little more clarity myself. But I'd like to hear our Director of Community and Business Services weigh in a little bit here, so maybe we could get some clarity before we go any further.
Director Goodman?
Absolutely. Thank you. And through you, Your Worship. There's a whole pile of notes I've made here, so I will do my best to address them. But I would like to preface this that really it's a happy accident with the amount of money that we have left over from the first round of intakes. I don't think that our recommendation would change from report number 16. In fact, if anything, it would go down. So I will preface it with that. And I totally appreciate the concern about including not-for-profits, speaking to Councillor Gorell's particular point, and that's an easy one to take out if we decide to proceed with it, with this particular option. Our not-for-profit organizations will actually have another opportunity to apply this year. Our community grants program does in fact have a fall intake, and that would maybe be the best way for them to capture that lost revenue, for example, speaking specifically of plant sales that have been canceled or huge community events and whatnot that are a fundraiser. Again, the intent of what we were trying to propose this evening was kind of a quick response. Typically, we would take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to develop a program like this. But I've called over 20 businesses now. I've had some anecdotal conversations with an additional 10, 15 businesses. And as these restrictions are lifting, they're looking for some real quick hits in terms of some support to help make sure that they can open their doors or conduct business as per the safety protocol that are put into place and whatnot. We do additionally recognize that some businesses have put out this cash, and I wouldn't be opposed with direction from council, where we don't normally allow funding under our community grants program for expenses that have already been incurred. Council may opt to waive that requirement and say, for example, if a particular store has proof of payment for a particular item that allowed them to meet those requirements, that we may be able to account for that. For example, we can certainly take this back and make some revisions based on, oh, I'm just going to stop there.
No, that's okay. I have Councillor Maybe on the next, to speak next. So if you want to finish your thought, Director Goodman.
Just going to go through and make sure there were no other points. Certainly in terms of accountability and how the funding has been spent, we can ask for follow-up reporting after the fact. Where with our community groups, we typically don't ask for proof of payment. We do ask that they hold on to the receipts for a period of 7 years so that if we need to do a follow-up audit, but again, we generally know that the depth and breadth and kinds of projects and programs that are being conducted in our municipality, we can certainly strengthen that to improve clarity and accountability so that if that funding was proposed for directional signage on the floor, and somebody were to go in and didn't observe that we could maybe go back and open up that door. I believe I've caught the general gist of the questions at this point, but if I've missed something, please feel free to throw it back out there again.
Okay, Director or Councillor Fody, do you have a follow-up before I go to Councillor Maybe? You do. Okay, so I'll let him follow up and then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Goodman. Is there any of these current items that have been canceled, and thus it'll change the bottom line to a 0 as opposed to the number that might be there now, like I mentioned earlier about the Turkey Fair?
Through you, Your Worship, we do know in fact that the Turkey Fair has been canceled for this year. Council can choose on a line-by-line item. We opted to proceed with that knowing that the event had been canceled because it's a tangible widget that would be used for other community events. So just like most of our village groups, they tend to share this equipment. So should an event happen this fall, that was the thought there. But we do recognize that there are another 2 events that are both scheduled for fall. 3 events that are scheduled for fall. One would be the art tour in Lyndhurst, the Art Bomb Festival in Gananoque, and the Steampunk Festival in Gananoque as well. And what we may opt to do in that particular instance is say, we will not release the funds until we're confirmed that the event will occur. There's different ways that we can certainly mitigate that. So the savings in terms of that $60,000 disbursement wouldn't change significantly, but it would certainly be lowered.
Okay, Councillor Maybe, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Your Worship, and possibly to Ms. Goodman. With needs for COVID, there's a lot of different needs for PPE and plexiglass and tape and all kinds of stuff. So that's a pretty fluid request from any one or several businesses, and it needs to happen quickly. And because we're getting close to actually having some of these businesses open up and get some cash through their doors, as Councillor Jameson had alluded to. So I think it's very pertinent that we do keep this one on. And then as the staff and Ms. Goodman, you're kind of vetting all of these requests, you have a pretty good handle on what businesses need what and how they're operating and how good they are to our community. So it is important that we actually lean on you a lot to actually give us the best opportunity to help these businesses out and get them back on their feet. So again, thank you for this one. And going back, I know we'll go back to number 16, and again, the same thing. There's many things there that may be canceled or have already canceled, so it will change the bottom line immensely so that we may have even more dollars to help on this number 17. Thank you.
So, sorry, Councillor Olkey, did you have your hand up, or was it? Yes, Councillor Olkey. Apologize.
Just looking at the document, you might want to put up front that's an extraordinary thing and probably a one-time event. Very much up front. There's a lot of boilerplate in there, and I know why there's boilerplate in there, but I think you might want to focus people's attention on why it's being done right at the start.
So what I might suggest to appease Councillor Gorell and to fit into Director Goodman's, no, I think your points are very well taken, Councillor Gorell, and I by no means did I think your comments were contrary to business or what have you, but as we all are aware in the government sphere of reference, we have to make sure that we're not speaking out of both sides of our mouth and that the program is done in a way that is easily quantifiable and that hopefully is not abused in any way, shape, or form. Might I suggest that if the motion that's on the floor is that Council approve special community grant COVID intake and that Council delegate authority to staff for the review and the award of grant applications. Might I suggest that in order to award under the COVID intake to businesses who require additional assistance during this unique time frame, as Councillor Olkey had indicated, that we require either receipts from purchases for those things that have already been purchased, whether it's plexiglass, signage, that sort of thing that's going forward, or disinfectant, blah, 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 that sort of thing, or that we get a quote. If they have somebody coming in to install plexiglass, to like directional, further plexiglass to divide up parts of the store or what have you, perhaps then we either have to have receipts from previous purchases or a quote for work to be done before we can award that. Would that suffice, or would that give you more comfort? It's just a suggestion on my end. Councillor Jameson and then Councillor Grau.
Your Worship, I think it's moving in the right direction to the extent that the COVID intake motion we have to be sure to take the not-for-profit reference out, and also, however you want to word this, that we ask our business services director to ensure that it's a very tight set of protocols, very tight set of expectations when they're presented to businesses, to your point about plexiglass and everything else. Well, I know that in discussions with Ms. Goodman, we talked about at least one situation where maybe that needs to improve. I'm talking about a merchant. And I know she's very cognizant of the expectations around physical distancing and providing the right sanitary situations and so on that could be in the guidelines that our staff presents to businesses who want to apply for help, that it's clear to them what that expectation and perhaps limitation might be. And I know she knows about this, so it's not like I'm making it up or we have to make it up. I know she's very familiar with the expectations from the health unit and the provincial directives.
Councillor Gorell?
Also, definition of the type of business that we're talking of helping here. One, it seems the conversation has revolved around storefront businesses, and we've all read, I'm sure, a couple of businesses that were hurting for other reasons. They were farm to table. One comes to example. So by saying that we're helping out with the government guidelines and social distancing, that's sort of implying storefront business. What about the small businesses that we may also want to help out? We're walking a bit of a tightrope here. And again, I don't want to seem like the bad guy. It's not a bad idea at all. And my last point would be the amount of money. It says in here 500 to 2,000. We're only talking $37,000. So I would suggest that 500 is a reasonable number, up to, I would, top of my head, 1,200 bucks. I don't know. I have no idea how much want and need, but if I was a small business, I'd certainly put something forward. And $37,000 may not go too far. But again, what type of businesses specifically are we looking to help? Do they have to have a storefront? Is it all about social distancing? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So Director Goodman and then Councillor Fody, and then I'm gonna maybe make a suggestion here. Go ahead.
Okay. And through you, Your Worship, too. Sorry, I'm like looking across my monitor and I apologize if that's distracting. One of the things that we had considered, let's say it was a consulting service. So it's not a storefront, for example. They don't have a way to go out and safely meet in a public setting with someone. But perhaps they required a Zoom subscription to get them over a 6-month hurdle, for example. We know that those subscriptions can range from $20 a month in excess of $100 a month. And, you know, in the discussions that we'd had at the staff level, those sorts of things we would also consider, certainly, because it allows a business to stay viable when they can't have that face-to-face interaction. And perhaps it's just having that access to that subscription or that tool that would enable them to have some sort of continuity of business.
Well, sorry. Councillor Fody, I'll let you make your comment and then I'll make a suggestion. Oh, Vanessa, can you unmute Councillor Fody, please? Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. The one thing I saw when looking through this COVID is that I think a lot of the businesses that likely need perhaps the most help haven't even opened yet. They don't even know when they're going to open. They're not going to know when they're allowed to open. So if a business was to say open this coming Friday, they can maybe best understand now how much behind or out they are. But I'm thinking of campgrounds and marinas in particular, which our township here has many and good ones. And yet the window isn't even there for those folks yet. I don't think we've touched the tip of the iceberg here of the people that are going to actually require help. The businesses that we're talking about now with the plexiglass, they're fortunate enough that they actually have incurring money all the time. It may be substantially less than they would like, but at least they have some cash flow. Whereas the businesses I'm referring to here a moment ago, they haven't even opened the doors.
Director Goodman.
Certainly, and again, through you, Your Worship, one of the things, and for example, with the marinas, they may choose to tap into this opportunity for things such as signage. So I know in speaking with two of our different marinas, for example, one of the concerns that they have is that when they do open, how do we adequately communicate requirements for social distancing at a dock setting, and furthermore, additional safe boating practices to prevent that spread. And that might be limiting, encouraging people don't beach together, don't raft up your boats together, for example. So they may look at this as an opportunity to post some signage on their property to help with those measures. I know it's a little bit less direct in support of their business, but still something that they feel is important in terms of communicating in times of COVID.
Okay, so rather than talk in circles on this, because I do think there's some very valid points made, and I know this might put a wrench in the motion that we've already tabled, but would it be prudent to ask the director to go back and sort of revise what was brought forward with some very good, valid discussion that we've had tonight, with some suggestions to sort of make the policy a little tighter? But having said that, I realize that it speaks back to what we're talking about for the tabled motion. So I think that if we table this motion, I guess it would be the case, and then bring it back at the subsequent meeting, then we could just have a further review of the policies, just augmented slightly based on the conversations we've had, to give a better comfort level to the council, but that we could go through the grants. If we brought back the previous tabled motion, that we could go through the grants line by line, and as has already been previously discussed, some of them won't even happen, or we can put caveats on the funding, if you will. So I'm looking for some consensus here. If you want to either defeat the motion that's brought forward for the COVID intake, or would you like to table it until a subsequent meeting? Direction for anybody want to hold their hand up? Help me here. Councillor Carell and then Councillor Maybe.
Once again, one wouldn't want to seem going against something as generous as this is. I would get back to one point though. So I am generally in favor of having it reworked, but I'd also like fairness brought into this. Someone asking or getting $500 for something and someone asking a larger amount of money, that's putting a lot of weight on staff making judgments. And it might be the case where this is an even Steven. You're in or you're out at a certain level of funding. I don't know how you get around that fairness. I mean, who's to make those decisions? Here we are, council, just, yeah, go ahead. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Maybe, and then Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Yes, I believe we need to table it to refine it maybe a bit more and give it some of Councillor Grell's points of view, which would be helpful, to have some sort of basis on it. The other thing I wanted to wonder, if we're talking about signage, have you received the provincial signage that they have put out as an option to have it as handouts to the businesses to keep everything consistent? I know I received a brand new package today on the 4 pieces and in bilingual setting also. So just wondering if it has arrived, and if not, I could pass that on.
Has there been anything, Madam Clerk or CAO, do you know of any signage that's come from the provincial government, or Director Goodman, has anybody received anything specific? Nope.
Through your worship, I haven't seen anything. We are really relying on government and public health official websites, though, for any signage that we produce and or share across the community. So,
okay. So Deputy Mayor Lackey and then Councillor Jameson, and then we've got to make a decision one way or the other on this so we can move our meeting along. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we talk about marinas and campgrounds and that type of thing, as you well know, we sign contracts year to year for those types of services that are provided to us. So again, I think there needs to be a more in-depth approach, because some of these businesses are getting paid their full amounts from their renters. So, and some are not.
Yeah, we'll have a just offline discussion about that because there are some businesses who have not seen a dip in their income. They continue to receive their payments, as Deputy Mayor Lackey has indicated. Councillor Jameson?
Just so in my own mind, I'm not mixing up CBS 16 and CBS 17. My personal point of view is I'd like to see us proceed with CBS 16. We have experience with dealing with the grant regime, how it was constructed when we took office, and subject to the obvious impact of COVID with respect to things moving ahead or not, the judgment of staff and the knowledge of staff as to whether some grant should proceed. And we have evidence from the past that where we have approved a grant, it didn't go ahead because something happened and it didn't proceed because staff made the judgment. So I'd be inclined to separate the two. With respect to 17, I take the points where there was also the discussion about somebody having already made an investment with respect to the COVID challenge, that we could help retroactively allow us to take a closer look at 17 to refine it to the point where we would be comfortable with helping, but at the same time take a look at somebody that's already done some things in response to getting open or going forward to get open. So that's how I see the two of them as separate discussions, and I hope that I'm on track there. Thank you.
So the suggestion that I have is that we table 17. That's
Madam
the
Mayor.
COVID. Yes.
Sorry, my apologies. So we wouldn't table it. We would postpone it to June.
Postpone it till a later meeting. Pardon me. Thank you.
Welcome.
It's really difficult when you're not beside me to give me the poke. Thank you. So can I get I realize that Councillor Jameson is wanting to move ahead, but I think the consensus around the table is that we want to see the guidelines just tightened up a bit more before we're willing to move forward with that. So we would postpone this until the first meeting in June at the committee of the whole, and then we can move forward from there. Is that the consensus? So I'll need a motion to postpone this. Motion made by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Maybe. And all those in favor of the postponement, please put your hand up. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So that's carried unanimously, Madam Clerk. So now we're back to the tabled motion for CBS 016-120, and that's the actual list of grant suggestions for grant recipients. So in light of running out of time, because I know that we still have an in-camera meeting we need to get through here as well, and we need to take a break. So maybe we'll just go through it line by line and have quick discussion on that if that's okay. And we'll just do a thumbs up for whether or not there's any discussion on some of these line items, and then we'll try to bang through. Is that okay with the rest of everybody? Unless Councillor Grell, do you want to make a general comment before we go through line by line? Councillor Grell?
Oh, it will come up.
Thank you.
It'll come up.
It'll come up? Okay. Okay, with your indulgence, Director Goodman, that's what we'll do, and we'll go there. Okay. So on your list, it would be page number, oh, silly, there's no page numbers on this. I don't know if I screwed up it would be page 38, 39, and 40, I believe, in your package. So the first, Appendix A, it would be the Art of Courage. Is that the very first grant? I want to make sure I don't have my pages mixed up, Ms. Goodman. Okay. So it's Art of Courage. So the projected cost is 15,000. Eligible amount would be 10. Total requested was 5, and recommended funding is 1. The Art Bomb Festival, I know, was recognized by Ontario. I realize it is in Gananoque, but Councillor Fody, you had something to add to that? No? Okay. So Councillor, maybe you have something to add to that?
Is that one still going ahead?
Well, and maybe that's you're right. We should, before we get ahead of ourselves. So should we put a caveat that they only get the check if the event goes ahead, if it is an event? Okay, I'm seeing that. So the caveat is that we've allocated that amount of money if your event goes ahead. If it does not go ahead, you don't get the check. Okay? Okay, so that's universally understood by the council. Okay, so Art of Courage, 1,000, recommended funding is $1,000. Everybody's in agreement or not in agreement? Yay?
Deputy Mayor has something.
Oh, Deputy Mayor, sorry. No, you're
In agreement.
okay. So thumbs up for agreement. Yep, good. Okay. Friends of Charleston Lake Provincial Park, provisions of support to offset costs for their annual fall picnic in the park, a free senior event. And that was for $1,500. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Okay, good. Deputy Mayor, yes or no? Oh, can you, Matt? Oh,
That's same thing. When we have these group things that may not happen, I just want to make sure that,
that they don't, the
all
money
of
doesn't
these,
go unless they have it. Yep.
correct.
Okay. Again, Steampunk Festival, $1,000. Yay, nay? I don't know that much about steampunk myself, but if it brings people to the area, if they're able to go ahead. So anybody who's a nay, what I see? Okay. Gananoque District Humane Society, $10,000 recommended funding. Yay or nay? Yay? Yay? Okay. Gananoque, Thousand Islands Chamber of Commerce, intensive tourism, marketing, production, and distribution of materials and print across digital platforms. I know that they have changed their strategy recently. So that's a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Okay. Girls Incorporated, offset costs for summer programming, including facility rental, program supplies, staffing, travel, and participant subsidy. This would fall under the same category. If it doesn't happen, they don't get the funding, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a yay for everybody? Yay. Junior Achievement, that was nil. Kind of surprised to see that from Muskoka, but anyway. Lansdowne Agricultural Society, repairs to and replacement of the wire fencing around the track. Now, even though that is an event, the Lansdowne Fair, the Lansdowne Agricultural Society is the one that's proposing this. And if anybody's been by the fairgrounds as it faces the municipal building, it's getting a bit derelict. So I think this is their push to try to clean things up there. I know that things are starting to, it's been difficult to keep the boards up, I think, and their signage as well. Councillor Fody? Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think if we're going to set a precedence, we're going to have to stick to it. If we're saying we're not going to give money to those who don't go ahead, and Lansdowne Fair's already announced they're canceled, we're going to wear a little egg in our face if we give them money anyway. And I'm all for the Lansdowne Fair Board. We could easily, hit the pause button here and forward the same money under a different request next year, if so be. I understand it's a good working time this summer to get caught up in some of these, but I just don't want to see a precedence where we're going to tell everybody that we're not putting money forward if you don't hold the event, and then turn right around and do the opposite for any one event.
I guess the reason I thought of this somewhat differently is because it's for actual construction costs for maintenance of the grounds, sort of like what the Gananoque Humane Society is. That if this was for to help assist for, say, entertainment on the Friday night, then that would be a different ask, because it's more of a, and I'm not trying to advocate just because of Lansdowne. I just looked at it differently, I guess is why I was saying that it would be repairs to the facility. Councillor Fody again, go ahead.
Just to follow up, I looked at it the same way you did. I'd like to see it go ahead. It's just that I think you had mentioned yourself earlier about speaking out of two sides of our mouths. If we're going to say, no, if you're not going ahead, we're not funding, and then we make an exception, it wouldn't look good on either you nor I being Lansdowne Fair Board advocates. But that aside, I don't know. I'm open to other opinions. See what the rest of the council says here.
Councillor maybe, and then Councillor Olkey.
Issue with the fence being derelict and people getting injured on it, whether it's a fair or not.
So you want to see it repaired, whether the fair goes on or not, because of the condition
Health
of
and safety.
health and safety. Okay, Councillor Olkey, you had something to add?
I would concur with health and safety. I saw it more as a capital thing to assist in the maintenance of it, as you did, Your Worship.
Okay. Okay, so I think those points are duly noted. Any further discussion on that one? So everyone's in favor of the Lansdowne Agricultural Society? Okay. Lansdowne Association for Revitalization, that one was withdrawn. And then there was another one to hire a consultant to review and update the Community Development Plan 21 to 26. And that's for $5,000. Councillor Burrell, this was the one that you were concerned about?
Yes, I don't quite understand. It strikes me as that's something that should fall under the purview of capital expense, or pardon me, capital budget of the township. However, if that's the type of thing we want to shift over to community grants, I feel more comfortable if that wasn't on the community grant program. How's that? There you go.
I actually had similar thoughts to you from the point of view that this looked very much like a CIP, part of a CIP, and maybe Director Venditti can shed a little light because we didn't see the full grant application, so we don't know specifics in it. So if it's overlapping with what we're doing as CIPs, then perhaps we may want to focus on the CIP instead. So Director Venditti?
Thank you, through your worship. I had the same concerns when I first saw the application, but in looking into it a little more, and Director Goodman may be able to offer some additional input, it's not a community improvement plan. It's more helping the LAFR group focus on what they will be focusing their efforts on for the next 5-year plan. It may help in contributing when we do get to doing our community improvement plans, because they have focus and they have defined some of the things that they hope to accomplish as a community group over the next 5 years. But it is different from what we're looking at doing with the community improvement plans through the township.
Director Goodman, do you have anything to add to that? And then I'll go to Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I would really mirror what Marnie had recommended. They had a 5-year plan that actually sunsets at the end of this calendar year, which is why they came forward with this particular request at this time. That was the plan that saw things like the launch of their own webpage, for example. So it's more about their own viability in terms of their own actions, projects that they want to take on. But that information could very well feed into a CIP in future in terms of beautification or other development sorts of projects. Admittedly, it is like splitting hairs, but one is to really inform us, and the other, the one that the proposal is addressing, is to inform LAFR and their activities.
Okay, Councillor Jameson.
I appreciate the perspective. I guess I'm thinking as being a Sabara director and not spending some time over some years developing plans for that association. I would have to say that we are going to at some point undertake the community improvement plan in the context of where the township will go with its strategic planning. So I'm not against this in principle, well, maybe I am. What I'm confused about, that's what I am, I'm confused that one goes down the road out of context with the larger community's need to look at the whole township. And so you potentially to generate an outlier situation when we're trying to do community improvement plans at some point, when we get beyond the constraints we're in now, in a way that actually brings all the communities together around some common thinking for all, instead of what I've observed in my time living here is a tendency to have, well, the Lansdowne thinking and the Lyndhurst thinking and the Sealy's Bay thinking, and it doesn't jive all the time. And sometimes I think it's counterproductive. The divergency isn't there. So I wouldn't vote against it necessarily, but I'd like to see it in the broader community improvement plan concept when we get to our strategic planning exercise, which I believe is probably going to be many months off now. So, thank you.
Councillor Olkey, and then I might have a thought for this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just see this as an annex to a wider township plan, which is a very succinct way of saying what Councillor Jameson just said. Thank you.
Okay. So could it be that the $5,000 to the association to do a plan that involves the community in the middle of a crisis sort of, I know that we've put off our strategic plan and community improvement plans because we can't get people together. So to me, the $5,000 that you're trying to put aside for these guys to put the community development plan together, is it going to be done by a few people, like 2 or 3 people over a telephone conference, or is it really going to involve the community? So it's one of those things where I don't know how they're actually, even if we were to award it, how are they going to actually put the funds to good use without involvement of the total community? So again, I don't want to discourage the community group from getting together and trying to better the community, but at the same time, I don't know how effective they can be in this particular crisis. So yay or nay are we looking at here? Nay? Nay? Okay. So the Lansdowne Cemetery, ongoing lawn maintenance and beautification. We have allocated $2,000, and that's for grass cutting and weed whipping, I'm assuming. Councillor Maybe? Vanessa? Madam Clerk, can you have Councillor Maybe off? Thank you.
Does the township actually look after all the cemeteries? Isn't that part of the process? No. So who is looking after the Lansdowne Cemetery then?
I believe that they've come to us for assistance because they are dwindling in numbers, and so this is our opportunity to assist them to help maintain the cemetery to basic
Great
standards.
idea then.
Councillor Fody, thank you, and then Deputy Mayor Lackey.
We won't try and up that one, Councillor, maybe. Perhaps Ms. Goodman could clarify this, or actually Adam Goheen should weigh in on this, I'm sorry. This number derived for the maintenance, is that kind of a generic cost for an average a similar sized cemetery this year? I know our own Works Department, Mr. Goheen could weigh in on this, plans on cutting back dramatically. There may not be a lot of pristine cutting anywhere in our township this year because of funding. So is this 2,000 just to see where it comes from? Is that where that came from? It's just a donation in portion, or is that a cost you would see to do a few cuttings? I know that wouldn't accomplish a lot, maybe.
Director Goheen or Director Goodman, whoever wants to speak to this. Sorry,
Director Goheen, if you want to.
And then I'll go to Ms. Goodman.
Yeah, I thank you, Your Worship, through you. Good question. I certainly wouldn't compare what it costs for our crew, especially now, since we're not able to hire seasonal staff at a significantly reduced hourly wage. So, but just thinking in my head, you'd be looking at for $2,000. That's 10 cuttings at $200. That's not a lot of money. If I was a young student, as I did when I was young, I would mow lawns all the time. But frankly, I don't get a sense that $2,000 is going to go all that far with that particular site. It's a very dense site, and the folks prefer it to be kept to a level of service that is such that we would see perhaps in a golf course.
Ms. Goodman, would you like to add anything to that?
Certainly, and thank you, Your Worship. We did provide some support last year to this group because this cemetery board, like several others across our entire township, are struggling. Some with volunteer recruitment, some with funds generation, others just in terms of how to write the paperwork properly. So this is part of a bigger portfolio, one that's on my horizon, just in terms of the kinds of supports that may be required. The part of the recommendation actually for the funding stems from the scoring matrix. So when we look at this, there is definitely a need with this one particular organization. However, when we look at the sustainability of this work and offering these funds, when we look at the economic impact and the innovation of what they're proposing, unfortunately, it doesn't quite measure up against some of the other proposals in that respect. We have had a few conversations with this group in past in terms of trying to help them with their marketing. We'd ask some questions about purchase of plots in terms of revenue generation to offset the perpetual care, so on and so forth. So we do see this as bigger, part of a bigger package. However, we do think that amongst the evaluation committee, think that the $2,000 is in line with the overall score for this particular grant application.
Deputy Mayor Lackey, you have something to add?
Yes, thank you. Through you, I've had similar conversations. The cemetery is run by a very small board of directors who have been trying to take care of it. The problem that they have is that there are some plots, several, which are available, which are viable, but they don't have the manpower to do the maintenance. So the alternative is they could just walk away and we own it. That's the way it works. So we can give them money to try and maintain it, or we can own it. So take your pick.
So on that note, Councillor Jameson?
I have 2 points I'd like to make. One, to Deputy Mayor's point, is that the alternative truly is that they'll just simply walk away if we don't support them? Or is that just putting it off for a year? It's more of a rhetorical question than anything else. Sounds like that's where it's going anyway. But what point I wanted to make, because Ms. Goodman made it and I didn't want to let it go by, we're dealing with volunteers and a declining number, probably and mostly driven by the fact that unlike us, people are getting older, and also the businesses in the community have taken an awful hit and will not be in a position for some time to lend the help they have with various projects, whether it's the Turkey Fair or Santa Claus Parade or everything else. So I only raise that because I think we should keep that in mind as we're looking at how our community volunteer projects come to us. I think we're going to see more of this type of ask simply because you've got a shrinking population of people that are going to want to take things on. So that's my comment on this particular one.
So based on that comment, are we in favor of the $2,000 for the Lansdowne Cemetery grant? Yeah, yay or nay? Yay? Yay, okay, got it. Lyndhurst Rejuvenation Committee, support print and online marketing of the Lyndhurst Arts and Culture Tour, $1,500. Again, if it goes on, then obviously the check will be cut. If not, then that will be changed. Yay or nay? Yay? Yay. This was the other arts and culture tour that was recognized by the province this past year. They did a lot of work to make that a success. Lyndhurst Santa Claus Parade, $1,600. Offset projected loss of sponsorship from local businesses that support the parade. Hiring of the band, Santa treats and for treats for children from Santa. Yeah, is that a yay or a nay? Yay. Okay. Perfect. Lyndhurst Turkey Fair, $23.88. Now that was canceled altogether. Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Yeah, sorry, going back to the parade, it was my impression that you're not allowed to give out treats.
They give them out. They give them out as they go to Santa Claus. So when they sit on Santa's lap, they don't give out treats until you get a little bag full of treats there at Santa's lap. I did not sit on Santa's lap last night. I did see Santa last year, but I didn't wait in line for my bag of treats, just to let you know. I left those for the kids, the little kids. Lyndhurst Turkey Fair, 2388. If this is allocated, Ms. Goodman, one thing that we didn't really talk about is if we allocated it now, could it be deferred till next year? Meaning it would not be given until next year if we allocated it now, if they've already canceled their turkey fair.
Through you, your worship, and I may call on our director Tyndall, to back me up on this one. If I don't know that we can carry the money forward to allocate next year, so it may impact the total pot of money that we would have available in previous years if we just awarded it and deferred it. That would be fresh $2020, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I guess then this one would be X'd off because they're not having it this year. Well, for sure. Oh, sorry, Councillor Oki. I apologize. Councillor Oki?
Thank you, Your Worship, and for you. I would look at this in much the same way as I would look at the fencing for the Lansdowne Fair. It's quite true they have lost.
Oh, it's the pop-up tent.
They have lost the church halls, technically. This would be something that would facilitate a future turkey fair and could be stored. There is storage space there in that rather curious garage that's on the street.
Right, I apologize. I forgot that this one was.
I would support going ahead.
Okay, so yay, all those in favor of this particular line item, yay or nay? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Rockport Development Group, support for community beautification, purchased and installed flowers production, installation of interpretive sign, repair village kiosk, $49.50. All those in favor, yay or nay? Yay. Okay, yay. Rockport Rec Hall was 0 because that was retroactive. Because I think that was against the rules. Because generally speaking, the rules aren't for previously happened events. And then Sealy's Bay American Graffiti, general support for the American Graffiti event is $2,000 if should it go ahead. Yay or nay? Yay? Yay? I don't see any nays. Okay. Last page. Sealy's Bay Lyndhurst Chamber of Commerce to support the implementation of local enterprise action plan, lead the consumer marketing initiative funding, which would be used to match retailer contribution to incentive program. That's $5,000. Yay? Nay? Yay? Oh, we're good? Okay, yay. If you're nay, put up your hand. Councillor Maybe, did you want to say something?
Question.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a question. Is not that Sealy's Bay Chamber of Commerce initiative, the LEAP, similar to one we already defeated about Lansdowne Agricultural Revitalization? Is it something similar?
No, it's something very different. It's where they're subsidizing, isn't it? Where they're getting retailers involved. Ms. Goodman, you want to speak to that?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This is like an incentive program that the Chamber is running on behalf of their members. So that if I were to purchase a $20 coupon from my local neighborhood store, that the value of that $20 is made up in part from the proprietor or the store itself, and they wanted to use these funds to help leverage that difference, so that really the consumer, if I was purchasing that ticket, for example, or that gift certificate, would get more value than what the store can initially put on the table, I think is the premise here.
Okay, so we're in favor, yay? Yay? Okay. Stonebridge Quilters to offset the facility user group insurance requirements for the purchase of materials for quilts, and they're donated to cancer patients. $500. Yay? Yay? Okay. Swiftwind Equine Center to support marketing efforts, program materials, and capital improvements. $1,000. Councillor Maybe, go ahead, and then Councillor Fody.
Who is Swiftwind? Never heard of them before.
Are they on the old Henry Place on Highway 2?
Through you, Your Worship, They're located on Sweets Corners Road. In that neighborhood, they use a facility up there. And so this program is very similar to a 4-H program, but it's a little bit more specific to horses in particular. It's a young lady who's trying to get this up and off the ground, and she's had some struggles trying to build a solid clientele base. So what the preface of this is rather than paying for major capital expenses is to offset some of that recruitment for program participants. And if you have some success, then you can revisit us in future, but let's take some baby steps here.
Okay, Councillor Fody and then Councillor Olkey. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Maybe's question about who are they, that question has been answered. I think Ms. Goodman answered my other question, and how long they've been in business. I guess they're starting, so I'm good.
Okay, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I'm hearing something that's running a program like 4-H, but it sounds like a private business. I'm not sure this is the right place.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. It's like a social enterprise that she's endeavoring to run here. So she's got a business arm, certainly, but this is her not-for-profit arm that's offering basically, I don't want to say no-cost programming, but very low-cost programming. So she's running that almost at a loss at this particular point. Yeah.
She's trying to encourage kids to ride. Is that what she's trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
Who may not be able to afford it otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so is that a yay or a nay? It's for $1,000 at this point. Yay? Yay? Okay. Okay. Thousand Islands Association, support the pillars of river safety, shoal markers, environmental awareness, and community support communications no wake campaign. They had requested.
Mayor?
Yes, sorry.
My apologies. Councillor Gorell had a question.
Oh, I apologize. Councillor Gorell.
Thank you. Regarding the $1,000 for Swift Twin Equine, sounds like a great program. Is it indeed possible to separate out the commercial business from this $1,000 and accountably?
Maybe we could put some caveats on it, Ms. Goodman, that it goes to disadvantaged children in the area that would not be able to afford to ride, or perhaps people.
Pardon me, Your Worship.
Yes.
Sorry, my internet is just totally glitched out, and I'm losing huge chunks of what was just said.
So the question was, is there a way to separate the commercial side of her business out from this? And perhaps this could be earmarked if she can prove that it was given or earmarked for disadvantaged children or children with special needs, that sort of like horse therapy, if you will, that would be a better use and better way to earmark the funds if possible. And that's duly noted. Thank you, Councillor Gorell.
Mm-hmm.
So going on to the Thousand Islands Association for 5,000, Councillor Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you. This is one that I would actually like to see increased. I know that they have come to us about these shoal markers and that they are very vital to our safety and health of our patrons when they can get back out on the water. So this is one where I could see, not very often, I would say raise it, but this is one.
Okay, Councillor Fody, and then Councillor Gorell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Maybe. This was the only item I saw on this whole proposal that I thought was underfunded. They made it pretty clear on a presentation to us last fall, I believe, as to what they're undertaking and the costs and the overhead. And at that very time, we discussed the fact that we don't grade roads on the river, we don't plow their roads, we don't pick up their garbage. But I think we could at least jump in a little heavy when they do incur costs when it comes to signage and safety and the sort. We, not too long ago, turned down a request here for $5,000 on this very funding page. I would like to apply it right here.
Okay, so the suggestion on the floor is to double it from 5,000 to 10,000. Councillor Gorell, do you have something to add to that?
No, it was covered by Council Mr. Fody, and I'm all in favor of increasing that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lackey, or Deputy Mayor Lackey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I, as being someone from the river, there's several things. We have our fire boats, we have police boats, there's tow boats. There's several people who rely on those markers for public safety. And as Councillor Fody had mentioned, we don't grade the river. We don't do a lot of things. I am fully supportive of the full amount, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that due to the fact that the Americans who are part of the association can't come to their places, who pay us taxes, it's a declining of their membership, and they're going to hurt that way as well. So it's not that I want to support a declining business, if you will, but they still have to pay the bills to put those markers out there. They already have. Somebody got paid to do it, and it's if we didn't do it, you're going to have your firefighters, you're going to have your OPP, you're going to have search and rescue out there, because people are going to hit shoals and sink, basically. So I would like to support the full amount.
So the full amount being the $20,000, Deputy Mayor?
Correct. And moving forward, I would like the Director of Finance to look at an ongoing yearly participation in some way, shape, or form to provide that service as well.
Okay, so Councillor Jameson, and then Director Goodman. Councillor Jameson.
Yep. I get this. On the other hand, I think as part of our longer term look at things, we should be having discussions with Transport Canada and other jurisdictions that have jurisdiction on the water. So at the end of the day, we're on the land. I know it's our property, if you will, but I don't think this is something that we want to go down the road alone with. So as our treasurer takes a look at what we need to be thinking about going down the road, I hope we can begin to have discussions with other agencies around helping us with this, because I agree with Deputy Mayor, this it's critical, particularly to our own emergency services people, but I don't think we should do it alone. I really don't.
Okay, so I've heard two schools of thought. One is for the 10,000, so it would be doubling it, and one is for the full amount, which is $20,000. So, Councillor Gorell, go ahead.
I don't believe in the community grants program policy. We're allowed to go beyond $10,000.
Oh, thank you. And I believe that Ms. Goodman, that was what she was probably going to tell us. So,
and more.
And more. Okay, so Director Goodman, you want to add to that?
I did, and I just wanted to mention the fact that in their grant application, they did report that their total annual operating budget is $55,000. So an increase to $20,000 would be meaning that we're supporting their organization to the tune of more than 35%. And given that their geographical range, even though I recognize the bulk of the markers are within our municipal borders, their overall jurisdiction is far broader. So I would just want to caution council about that, although they can certainly consider other avenues for funding.
Okay, so but Councillor Gorell is correct in saying that the maximum is $10,000 for a grant on this?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Lackey, and then we'll call the question on this one.
I would definitely agree with that 10,000 note, but just remember we had 2017 and 2019 with high water, which broke chains and markers were lost. So um, it struck them pretty hard.
Okay, so the will of the council seems that 10,000 is an easy ask, and all those in favor of the 10,000, please put your hands up, thumbs up. Yes, yay, okay. So we're at 10,000. ATV Club, Thousand Islands ATV Club to establish new trails within the network, offset costs. $5,000 is recommended. Yay or nay? Yay, nay, yay. Okay, good. Wheels of Care to offset the cost of the use of accessible transportation to township residents. I think this is an easy. Oh, Councillor Oakley, you have something to add? Sorry.
Yes, Your Worship, and through you, in keeping with the generosity towards the Thousand Islands Association, and remembering down the back road, certainly of Ward 2, there are a lot of people who are disadvantaged about accessible transport places. And I would like to see this raised. And I would suggest that money we've saved elsewhere, $1,200 to take it to their maximum.
The 2,700 is, so you're recommended the 2,700?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Any discussion or any, Councillor Fody?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Olkey. I had more of a question on this. Who else is in on the funding of this organization? Because it struck me that our participation level financially is low, but I really don't know much about the organization and just how many people they move.
Okay. Director Goodman and then Councillor Maybe. And then we're going to take a break, hopefully.
Through you, Your Worship. This organization actually, only a small percentage of the ridership is derived within the municipality. So they have gone to town of Gananoque to receive funding. Of course, they do charge for their travels, so they're generating some revenue in that way. What they want to do is make sure that they're keeping the price reasonable for the few participants or for the few people who take advantage of the service, generally from the Lansdowne area.
So perhaps this would be an incentive to move it out towards the Sealy Bay Lyndhurst area for additional ridership. Perhaps we could ask them to look at that.
We can certainly do that.
Okay. So is it, sorry, Councillor Maybe?
Thank you, Worship, and through you. Yeah, Wheels of Care started with the Kidsman Club in Gananoque for many years and ran out of Carveth Care Center. And I know that Ted Kirby is one of the main drivers and looks after the service right now pretty well. Always looking for spare drivers, hence why I know maybe a bit about it. But certainly how many residents we have in our township that actually go on this ridership, and I know that they take them sometimes to the cancer clinic and such for treatments. So having this increased is not a big stretch in my mind, but it would be nice to know maybe what the split is between municipalities in the ridership. If we could find that out at some time, it'd be helpful for our deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, so based on that discussion, are we in favor of bumping it back up to the 2,700? Yay? Yay? Yeah. Okay, so 2,700. So by my easy figuring, we increased the total amount by $1,200 that we gave out based on what, because we lost 5,000, we gained 5,000 on the Thousand Islands Association, so that was a wash, and then an additional 1,200. So that would be added to the 6,138. So if my math is off, please let me know. Councillor Maybe?
The only other thing to add there is that there's several items on that list that are going to be off it this year, so our offset will be much different.
Correct. Director Goodman?
Oh,
there we go.
Pardon me. Okay. Just the question about the ridership for Wheels of Care through you, Your Worship. According to their grant application, 95% of users reside in Gananoque, and that helped inform the amount that we granted.
Well, I think that going forward, it might be an opportunity to market it to our, more to our residents. So, with that sort of keeping that in mind. So with that, I'm going to call the question on the discussion. So the motion was made by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Maybe that Council approve the distribution of community grants in the amount of $60,138 as detailed in Appendix A to report number CBS-016-20. Deputy Mayor Lackey? Sorry, do I have to bring it back? No? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't want to put Kate on the floor, but what's our new total? And is there any chance that at some point we can review the votes on these grants?
Review the quotes on the grant. Sorry, what did you say, Deputy Mayor Lackey?
The votes.
The votes. Meaning what everybody said for each line item?
Yes.
I was doing that more through consensus, not by individual. I didn't see, other than the one for the Lansdowne Association of Revitalization, which was turned down.
It doesn't have to be right now. But
well, I guess we could go back through the video and tally that. Okay.
That'd be what I'm asking for.
Okay, then that's what we can do. So the motion is on the floor. All those in favor, or Councillor Fody, did you have something you wanted to say? Oh, I apologize, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify, we're voting on the new amount, not the old one, which in my math and yours, 61,338. Is that correct?
That's correct, based on my rudimentary math. And Director Tyndall, is that correct?
I apologize. I didn't keep track of every change and update the total.
So the only change that we turned down the 5,000 for the Association of Revitalization, Lansdowne, and we increased the Wheels of Care from 1,500 to 2,700. So by my math, it should be 61,1338. So we should be amending the motion. Deputy Mayor Lackey, you're amending that?
Sure. Did we not change the 1,000 Ounce Association as well?
Sorry, yeah, I guess the 5,000 that we withdrew from Lansdowne Association for Revitalization in my mind went to the Thousand Islands Association, which was only 5,000. So it was a wash. So we took 5,000 from one place and added it to the Thousand Islands Association and then added more to the Wheels of Care. So thank you for that detail. I apologize. So the amendment, Deputy Mayor Lackey is motioning to amend the motion to be 61,338 as decided, and the seconder for that, Councillor Fody. And so I'll call the question on the amendment for 61,338. All those in favor of that amended amount? Unanimous. Okay, and so I'll call the question on the amended motion, which is that council approve the distribution of community grants in the amount of 61,338 as detailed in Appendix A to report number CBS-016-20. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, it carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to put the next motion on the floor and then we will, sorry, we have one final motion before we go into camera. I apologize. I know that everybody needs a break. Moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody, that council authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Parks Canada with regards to emergency response and suppression of wildfires. Any discussion on this motion? Anything to add, Chief? Oh, and Councillor Maybe, you want to add something?
Yes, and thank you, Your Worship, through you. By what I understand, this agreement has been in place for many, many years already. It just hasn't been formalized. So again, there are no new changes to this current policy going to be brought forward than what's already been taking place for the many years, correct?
Chief, is that what you understand as well?
That's correct. In 2014, this was presented to the council today. It was never formalized or passed, never signed. The agreement terminated last year. We brought Derek Bedford from Parks Canada, brought it forward to get the agreement re-signed and in place properly. So that's all it is this year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gorelli, you have something to ask?
Just like to ask through you, Your Worship, of Chief Lawson. You know how we have an agreement with MTO if we're out on the 401? Is there any such thing with Parks Canada, or would any thoughts on that? Would that be a bad idea?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not. Did you mean there was some remuneration or something from Parks Canada?
Yeah.
What it is a like-for-like agreement that we exchange our structural firefighting abilities to the park and the help with the firefighting in the wildland, where they bring their expertise with wildfire fighting on the parks and forest areas that they have more expertise in and more training in than we do. So it's kind of a like-for-like equipment. We can shift back and forth. So it's more just an agreement.
Very good. Thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. Unanimous, and it's carried. Okay, so we'll put this motion on the floor, which is for the in-camera portion, and then we'll take a 5-minute recess and then quickly come back. Moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the council form in camera to consider negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and to consider litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. All those in favor of the motion, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Okay, 5-minute recess, quick bathroom break, and then we'll back, and then we'll try to wrap this up as concisely as possible. Thank you.